Hello students, let's explore topic 5.2.2, which is related to ethical issues, which is also explored in another video, but this one's specifically about robotics, part of Edexcel GCSE computer science. There'll be some scenarios that might come up in the exam, self-driving cars, and this idea maybe, how robots, what is a robot essentially, and how AI might be related to it. So the best thing to do here is to have a look at some questions. We've got some exam questions here, but also just before we get into that, let's just explore this idea of self-driving cars, because there'll be some safety and potential algorithmic bias that creeps into these decisions. Obviously, cars like Tesla have made leaps and bounds in terms of how they operate, and but for example, how should these algorithms, these cars, be programmed to respond to, say, an object? If they see somebody walking across the road, the car, let's say the car suddenly applies the brakes immediately and for a sort of emergency stop. So that shifts the risk from the obstacle to the passengers, right? It shifts the risk to the car and whoever's inside, because they might swerve and hit something. And is that always the right decision? Are there certain things, like for example, if it's an animal running across the road, do we still if it's a squirrel, do we stop, an emergency stop for a squirrel? These are the kind of things where we might get bias, and bias isn't always necessarily wrong. It can be used to steer decisions that robots can't really generally make. There could be ethical decisions, there could also be lawful decisions, like if you're in Australia, you might not be able to harm a kangaroo, for example. They might be protected. So there are certain things to do with regions that might have to be in place to follow local law, and there'll be sort of legal liability and accountability for that. So let's have a look at some questions exploring this issue. Robots use sensors to collect data about their surroundings in order to carry out actions independently. Explain one way that a modern car is a robot. Well, interestingly, Teslas, because they have such a wide variety of sensors on them, aren't always allowed near certain sensitive places, because they can collect data from all around them. They're essentially 360 cameras and microphones and all sorts of other things. So that's why, depending on what countries you go to, there might be restrictions on electric cars. But let's answer this question. It's a lot, keep it simple. Why is it a robot? Well, you could have, I don't know, say the windscreen wipers. They come on automatically, because so with these kind of questions, explain questions, linking two things together is the best way, a linked explanation, because sensors detect rain. Okay, so those windscreen wipers come on because sensors detect rain. So you're getting a mark and a mark to give you 2 marks. It's a explain question, so you need to use that clause. You could say speed automatically adjusted. I'm just abbreviating here. Auto adjust, because sensors detect object ahead. Okay, so it might be keeping a certain safe distance from the car in front because it can sense that. Temperature sensors, thermometers, monitoring changes in temperature. So there are all sorts of different things you can add there. Computer programs control some aeroplane landings. Okay. One reason computers are not capable of safely controlling all aeroplane landings. Well, let's have a look. You could say system might be out of date, or have errors, bugs, that kind of thing. Not tested. Maybe scenario out of range of training data. Maybe it's encountered some sort of electrical storm which wasn't programmed into the data, so the program doesn't know what to do. Computer's input might be wrong. There might be a mechanical area. Computers cannot make moral, ethical judgments. It's just not in their remit to do that. There might be extreme scenarios, different weather patterns, incorrect data being displayed, all sorts of things you could put in there. But it's also an explain question, so you've got to make sure you're giving the examiner two things. Okay, you've got to give it at least two scenarios there. Good.